All right. We're in 19. Strange beginning of the first book of the Bible. This is the subject matter of from chapter 12. I didn't put the chapters down. I was just thinking through this morning. From chapter 12 through 22, which I think forms some kind of a unit, some kind of a beginning and end. Chapter 22 might be an inflection point where some things are brought, conflicts and obstacles are resolved, and then the people of God move forward. And really, when you think about this period from chapter 12 on, really all of it, it's really chaotic how Genesis unfolds from the fall. You have the fall in chapter 3, and then Cain and Abel in 4. And then you move on to the contagion of sin as it engulfs the whole human race, which gets summarized in chapter 6. And then there's the return to maximum disorder with the flood. And then we start all over again, and the chaos continues as we devolve back as the situation degenerates into the scene at Babel. And then the promise happens, but then immediately, you have Lot, and Sodom comes into the story. For some strange reason, the early text is preoccupied with Sodom. And it might be just because Sodom is such a paradigm case of evil in the Bible, and it will maintain that paradigm will be maintained all the way through. Ironically, though, once it gets to the New Testament, Jesus will speak relatively favorably of Sodom in comparison to Israel, which is right out of the Old Testament, right? So what he said was, if the things done among you had been done in Sodom, they would have repented. And that's very, very much like the way God spoke to the Israelites in the prophets when he accused them of being worse than Sodom and Gomorrah. Jesus, being him, thought and spoke the same way. And so there's this preoccupation with Lot and Sodom, which will disappear after chapter 19, at least in the book of Genesis, both Lot and Sodom. And we're in 19 right now. But then you move on. So that would be what, 14, 13, 14, where you get Melchizedek and so forth. This is why there's something to be said for just knowing subject matter. Forget theology for a minute, just knowing the subject matter, and then letting the subject matter speak to you. And then you develop your beliefs and thinking out of that subject matter. But now you get the covenant of land in chapter 15, and you think to yourself, okay, now that we got the covenant, it's just going to move forward in a straight line as God establishes his people. No, it's not going to do that at all. The next event after the covenant is Ishmael, the son of Hagar, whom Sarah gives to her husband Abraham, because Abraham, there's no kids. And so she cheats the system, so to speak, and gives her slave Hagar to Abraham, because that's how they rolled in those days. And now we have Ishmael, who is now a competitor, the heir. He's the eldest. He's the firstborn, so he's the heir. And then while he's still there, Abraham gets a promise that he's going to get a descendant. And Abraham's response to that is, well, how about Ishmael? Let's just stick with Ishmael. God said, no. Ishmael, I got plans for Ishmael, but that ain't it. There's going to be a son. And out of that, after that promise, we have the covenant of circumcision in anticipation of the birth of Isaac, which will close out this part of the narrative to some extent, in some way. Or the chapter after this, the resolution with the sacrifice of Isaac, with the non-sacrifice of Isaac. But now you have circumcision handed down as the defining mark of the people of God, the boundary marker for the people of God. To be among the people of God, males must be circumcised, and the women come along with them. And that's in chapter 17. So we have the covenant with Noah in chapter 8, with Abraham in covenant, well, with the whole human race, however you want to think of it. And then you have the covenant for land in chapter 15, and then the covenant of circumcision, which sits inside the covenant in chapter 15, which sits inside the covenant with Noah. And we have the defining mark for the people of God, the perimeter, if you will. So you think, okay, now we're going to go on with a straight line, right to Isaac and move on with the people of God. The answer is no. We got 2 whole chapters now that are going to deal with the question of Sodom. There's unfinished business with Sodom and with Lot. And the situation in Genesis stops, essentially pauses until, okay, we got to settle these issues of Lot and Sodom once and for all. And so 18 and 19 are the destruction of Sodom, but the saving of Lot and his 2 daughters. The 2 Sodomite sons-in-law are going to perish. Did I get that right? How many daughters did Lot have? 2 or 4?
I think he had 4, but it's not been always very.
No, it's not. We'll look at it. I went back and forth this morning as I was looking at it again. Anyway, it's quibbling over numbers. So now in chapter 19, we're going to see the destruction of Sodom and the parallel salvation of Lot. And you think, oh, okay, Sodom is taken care of. Now we can proceed in a straight line to the birth of Isaac and then the establishment of the people of God. No, Abraham and a king named Abimelech, king of Gerar, Gerar, which is a repeat of what happened to Abraham and Sarah in Egypt when they first got to Canaan. They went on to Egypt, and basically Abraham handed his wife over to Pharaoh. And we're going to see a repeat of that kind of a situation with this king Abimelech. And then that's got to resolve itself. And then finally, we're going to see the birth of Isaac. And then you think, oh, okay, now that the birth of Isaac has happened, the people of God are going to proceed in a straight line. And we're going to move on to Jacob and so on and so forth. And the answer is no, no. It's this final thing here, this sacrifice, when God commands Abraham to offer up Isaac as a burnt offering. And so you see these threats to the covenant appear and disappear over and over again. And Lot was one of them. And that was resolved with Lot choosing to go east instead of wanting the land of Canaan. So he takes off east and he heads to Sodom, where he's going to take up residence, only to have to be saved by God. And now we're going to have it happen once again with Isaac. And then finally, after that resolves itself, the history of redemption can proceed forward and move on from there. So I think the point being, as I look at the subject matter, this is why it pays to track subject matter, or one of a dozen reasons. Those 2 events are connected. What is started with the covenant in chapter 15 and Abraham's statement and the narrator's statement, and Abraham believed God and it was reckoned to him as righteousness, comes to fruition in some way in chapter 22 with his near offering up of Isaac in obedience to God's command, which is used by James in the book of James. And I think he thinks the same way that I just did. Not that he cares, he's the inspired writer, but he makes the same kind of connection. What was stated in chapter 15 somehow reached its fulfillment, if you will, in chapter 22, which we'll get to. But we're in chapter 19 because we're not done with Sodom yet. But these are just some thoughts that I have on the narrative and where it's headed, subject matter. It's not random. These people, these writers have reasons for the things that they selected to put in the narrative and why they offer such little text to some things, like Melchizedek, whom we want to know a lot more about, and so much text to other things like Lot and Sodom, which we don't really care about. So it's not the text we would have written, which is what makes it inspired. Because the text we would have written wouldn't be worth anything. But this is how the history of redemption goes. Fits and starts. Moves pauses, moves, pauses, jumps, goes left, goes right, breaks through, that's the way it works, all the way through. Up to and including the crucifixion of God, which would look like the ultimate defeat, only to result in resurrection and the vindication and exaltation of God. Go figure. All right. So let's talk about Sodom now. This is a, let me make this bigger. For people in here, I'm making this bigger. For people on the screen, it's the same size, of course. You can see that little dot to the left of the little square with the rectangle with Joshua in it. There's a, not a dot, a arrow. No, there isn't. Oh, there's a black arrow, excuse me. There's a black arrow over the word Dead Sea right there. So a lot of speculation about where Sodom is. It's a very interesting debate. Here I go again. And slideshow. So that's what we're interested in, this place right here, which would be Sodom is somewhere around there, but there's these interesting, the scholars don't take conservative evangelical scholars seriously sometimes. There's reasons for that. But, there's a lot of debate about where Sodom is. And, this is make this a little bit smaller. For example, they've uncovered, there's this find in roughly the place where you just saw with the arrow, that's got this terrain that's got burn layers in it. They're torched, and they find all these sulfur clumps like this right here, which they can set on fire. They burn. And so, some in the evangelical world say, see, there it is. There's Sodom. And these sulfur clumps are everywhere. And the burn layer is unbelievable. But the problem is, if you listen to the archaeologists, that is found in a layer that they date to 1600s BC, which is way too late for these events. I have no strong opinion about this. I find the argument interesting, and listening to, the sort of contempt, whether deserved or not, the contempt of, sort of the secular scholarly world for the biblical side. And just as then also, on the other side, they'll tend to jump a little too quickly. Like I've got an article here about Noah's Ark. Find something, it's Noah's Ark. Well, let's hold off a minute and do some research here. But so this is the big debate. This burn layer, cities with these burn layers, because they've all got a burn layer except in that area, except for Zoar, where they think Zoar was. So it fits the data. It's just too late. I was gonna look and see if there's a.
Do we really trust the dating method?
Yeah.
Well, that's also a big question. I don't have any irons in this fire, so to speak, no pun intended. But I guess it doesn't matter.
What is brimstone?
I don't know. What is brimstone?
Because
Find
I'm saying
out.
here's brimstone.
What is brimstone?
Oh,
It's sulfur.
Apparently, it's mostly associated with hell.
It looks that way, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I would think that brimstone would be an awful lot like lava or rock. But I'm somewhat ignorant and just fucking off the top of my head.
Okay. Anyway, that's a debate about this. If you go a little closer in, make this bigger. So now we zoom in, and you're talking about. There's no question that it's somewhere around here. It's just a question of exactly where, and does this place where they found this stuff really?
Whether it's east or west of the Dead Sea is questionable. Cause they got question marks on both sides.
Yeah, they do, yeah.
So basically, it's the territory that eventually became Lot's, grandson to his daughter, or son to his daughter,
Moab.
Moab, it became Moab, territory of Moab.
Yeah, to me, it's east. Wherever it is, it's to the southeast,
So Lot was in Sodom or Gomorrah?
Sodom.
It was Sodom, so I got Sodom way up there. And Zoar down at the bottom.
Yeah, he wanted to get out of the hills. The Zoar, you can see it there. Here's the hills, right? You can't see it.
The one thing is, on the west side of that map, they got Zoar a lot closer to Sodom, which
Yeah,
does seem to reckon a little bit with the.
Yeah, we're not talking very far here though, either which way.
Yeah,
So here's the hills, but I don't, okay, I don't,
no,
okay.
that's fine, I'm just speculating when I'm looking at the map there.
yeah.
He would have come
Went
down,
through Gomorrah to get to
Lot.
Zoar.
he does not want to go up into the hills. I'm not really sure why. So he wants to flee probably down the coast, whichever way. There are a lot more hills over here than there is over here. Until he gets to Zoar. So we'll get back to that in a minute. All right. Okay. Now, 18 at the bottom, this ended with this extended dialogue between between Yahweh, God of Abraham, and Abraham, where Abraham tests the limits of his ability to get away with challenging God. And he arrives at, I won't destroy the city if I find 10 righteous people there. Really, what he's going to find is a righteous person, Sodom, and 3 that identify with him, and 2 that identify with him, 2 daughters and a wife, who are along for the ride. And really, Lot is along for the ride as well, because as we see right here in the narrative, God remembered Abraham. He didn't remember Sodom, he remembered Abraham. He saved Lot for the sake of Abraham. In fact, he was on his way to saving Lot for the sake of Abraham. Had Abraham said nothing, pretty good evidence that God was going to save Lot anyway, that it was already decreed. It wasn't a concession. It was, this is the way, of course I'm not going to kill Lot. And so you see it here. You have Yahweh hanging back and talking with Abraham while the 2 messengers, angels, destroyers, whatever you want to call them, grim reapers, head out to Sodom to take care of business. And when they get there, they've already got their marching orders. And their marching orders are going to be to get Lot out of the city before this conversation ever happens. They've already left with their marching orders. And so when they get there, there's no indication that they got the last word from God to change the plan and save Lot. They arrive and they do their thing, and part of that thing is to save Lot. And then God disappears. Okay. Did we finish actually talking about all the way through 11, didn't we? How far? I just listened to this morning and I can't remember now. Did we get to the sons-in-law?
I don't think so.
All right, we'll hear. So we have this scene where we're going to go look at Judges 19 in a minute, which I have said I think is one of the saddest stories in the Bible, short of the exile itself, which is this sad story times multiples of, however many sad stories it takes up to make up a nation of sad stories. Well, let's go ahead and read it and start it at 4 just to get the sense again. But before they lay down, the men of the city, so the 2 angels have come in, and Lot picks them up right then and there on the street, takes them into his house like Abraham did, feeds them. Here comes the men of Sodom, both young and old, all the people to the last man. There's the statement. I don't find one. That's the idea. There's not going to be 10. Because there's not enough people in the household of Lot to make up enough to get to the 10 that Abraham finally stopped at. And Abraham didn't care anyway. He just wanted Lot saved. Not trying to save Sodom. They surrounded the house. They called Lot, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us that we may know them." And Lot went out to the men at the entrance, shut the door after him, said, "I beg you, brothers, do not act so wickedly. Behold, I have 2 daughters who have not known any man. Let me bring them out to you." So the question then, to what Phil was saying, is that 2 daughters, 2 single daughters, and then he's got 2 married daughters that have that, because he's going to refer to sons-in-law in a minute. What are we dealing with here?
It's a tough one to wrestle with.
Yes, it is. "Let me bring them out to you and do to them as you please. Only do nothing to these men, for they have come under the shelter of my roof." But they said, "Stand back." And they said, "This fellow came to sojourn. This traveler, this foreigner, has become a judge. Now we will deal worse with you than with them." Then they pressed hard. Oh, by the way, did you notice I looked at my notes this morning. He didn't offer himself. They want the men.
He offered his daughters.
He didn't say, "Look, I beg you, brothers, don't do this thing. You can have me." He offers them his daughters. Then they pressed hard against the man, Lot, and drew near to break the door down. But the men reached out their hands and brought Lot into the house with them and shut the door. And they struck with blindness the men who were at the entrance of the house, or vice versa. They struck them with blindness and then opened the door. Because that'll distract your enemy if he can't see straight or anything. Both small and great, so that they wore themselves out groping for the door. I don't know why they're still groping for the door. Okay, here we go. Asking questions they already know the answer to. The men said to Lot, "Have you anyone else here?" Of course they know. Sons-in-law, sons, daughters, anyone you have in the city, or maybe they didn't, I don't know. Bring anyone you have in the city. So are they offering, "Hey, look, not just the family. If there's anyone else in this whole city that you want us to save, say the word now." And he don't do it. And that's consistent with, they came to the last man, to the door. Now you have open invitation. Sons, daughters, sons-in-law, daughters, and whatever, and anyone else that you want to take with you. He goes, "No, I'm good." Bring them out of the place, for we are about to destroy this place, because the outcry against its people has become great before the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it. So the question, the statement earlier in the text that I have come down to see if the outcry has come to my ears or whatever, and I've come down to see if it's as bad as I hear. Well, he knows the answer because these people are already off in that direction. So Lot went out and said to his sons-in-law who were to marry his daughters. Oh, interesting. Who were to marry his daughters.
That's what makes it hard to tell if it's 2.
Yeah, there's 2 daughters, and it's like Moses. It's way anachronistic because we're talking 2,000 years later. Joseph and Mary would be in the same boat. The betrothed would be equivalent to, in their cult, in the society's mind, marriage. Up, get out of this place, for the Lord is about to destroy the city. But he seemed to his sons-in-law to be jesting, which we infer from that they are not going anywhere.
Can you also infer they were not blinded? They were not part of
I don't know. They seem to be in the house.
I don't know, it's hard to say.
in the house. I thought
Well,
Lot
no, I
went
mean,
out and found the sons of-
If you got blinded, maybe when then somebody says, you need to come with me and get out of the city because it's about to be destroyed. It's one thing to hear those words from inside a house when you're not experiencing anything. It'd be quite another to have just been struck with blindness and you're groping around and then you hear, "You need to come with me." No, I'd rather stay here and grope around in total darkness. That's how I read it. As morning, so this went on. as morning dawned, so this went on for who knows how long, the angels urged Lot, saying, Up. So Lot said to the sons-in-law, Up. Get out of this place. Here come the angels. Up. We've had enough of this. They're finished. Take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, lest you be swept away in the punishment of the city. But he lingered. So the men seized him and his wife and his 2 daughters by the hand, the Lord being merciful to him. And they brought him out and set him outside the city. So they seized him twice. They seized him to drag him back into the house when they struck the men of the city with blindness. And now they have to seize him again to get him to come out of the city. So for some reason, he is wedded to Sodom. He does not want to leave. And as they brought them out, one said, one of the 2 angels, escape for your life. Do not look back or stop anywhere in the valley. Escape to the hills, lest you be swept away. So he doesn't want him in the valley. That whole valley is going to rain down fire and brimstone on the valley. So it's not going to be just Sodom and Gomorrah, right? It's going to be the valley. And it's going to be obvious in a little bit. So this whole valley, right here, that's the way I take it. Valley right here, unless you think it's the other side, but this whole valley right here, wherever they are, it's finished. It's the place where the kings were that Abraham saved. Lot said, he ain't done yet. He wants his way. Oh no, my lords. Behold, your servant has found favor in your sight, and you have shown me great kindness in saving my life. But I cannot escape to the hills, lest the disaster overtake me and I die. Who does he think he's talking to here? The angels say, go to the hills. I'm going to the hills. Hey, there's going to be a flood. Go to that. I'm going to make a flood happen. Go to that island right there. Oh no, I don't want to go to the island. I might get killed. Behold, this city is near, and that's Lot talking. Now he's negotiating. This city is near enough to flee to. You can see him pointing to a city or something. And it is a little one. I was wondering if you could do me a favor. How about you don't destroy that city? I'm reading between the lines. It's just a little city. Can you just leave that city alone? It's just a little city. No big deal. And I'll go there. I cannot escape to the hills. Behold, this city is near enough to flee to, and it is a little city. Let me escape there. It's just a little city. Can't you just leave it alone? And my life will be saved. And he, the angel, said, behold, I grant you this favor also, that I will not overthrow the city of which you have spoken. Escape there quickly, for I can do nothing till you arrive there. So this was their marching orders from the very beginning. God had no intention. God always planned on saving Lot for the sake of Abraham. Therefore, the name of the city was called Zoar. And you can see, and all this is debated. I don't have any strong opinion about it. Zoar is down here. So according to their thinking, Zoar will be down in this plain right here, south of the Dead Sea. All right, let me catch up if I have anything to say. I
It
don't,
says therefore it was called Zoar. Is that because it means something?
probably, I didn't write that
Oh,
down.
it means little.
Oh, okay.
There you go. Thank you. I don't have anything to say. The kind of text kind of reads on its own. It's very quick, very quick action. You know, it's one of those highly paced. Every once in a while, you read one of these stories that's very fast paced, and this is one of them.
Could he be saying I cannot escape to the hills because it's hard to climb? I
Or
don't
is that a
know.
health issue or something?
A health issue, yeah. Neither.
Could be, but we don't have a name.
Yeah.
Lest the disaster overtake me. So he thinks that he won't be safe in the hills. Don't know why he thought he would be safe on the plains. The plains being right around the corner from the valley that's getting fire and brimstone.
I get hung up on the angel having the power to grant him that request for Zoar. He must have had some sort of authority that we don't typically see. I don't know how to explain it, but
Yes. Yeah, I don't either. I don't know how this sort of thing works.
Probably told them, all right, it's gonna ask for this, so.
Yeah.
God knew this, but there's no doubt about that.
I think the principle is go down and destroy those cities and get Lot out of there. And obviously Zoar, this little town doesn't matter. What matters is the valley. What matters is this valley. Whichever side it's on, it's the valley where Sodom and Gomorrah are. That's what matters. Although I think they found the sulfur bowl all the way down south of Zoar. I don't really know. But they found them all over the place down there. It's really weird. That's indisputable where they find these things. It's just a question of how ancient they are. How ancient the ruins are that they exist in. Okay, 23, and I got nothing more to say about it. It reads for itself. I mean, the story tells its own story. What the question? Go ahead.
It could be that he thought if he went into those hills, between the two cities, he could still get caught in the fire.
Here, and between Sodom and Gomorrah.
Yeah.
Nobody can see me. Point.
We can.
Here between Sodom and Gomorrah, you know, I guess right here. Well, what's going to be odd about it is he's not going to want to stay in Zoar either. It's like the angels are vindicated because he goes to Zoar and it wasn't safe, so he ends up in a bunch of caves. Well, where are caves?
in the hills,
They're in the hills. Yeah, that's where he ends up.
that's why I shared about caves this morning.
Yeah.
Have you seen those caves?
So,
Yeah, that's,
Cave.
huh?
I'm not sure how my dream got the cave. I had a secret club in a cave somewhere.
I guess my comment on,
Whoops, am I doing?
Gross.
Oh, the Dead Sea Scroll area, is that in the?
Yes,
The Palmer community and all that?
that's interesting too. There's YouTube videos on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. But this is what they, go ahead, Vic.
I think that what you've taken us through here illustrates a couple things. One is Lot's extreme desire to stay in a very unhealthy situation for whatever reason. And then the other is, you know, when the Bible says fear God, this would be a prime example.
Yeah, go ahead.
The fact that that means aiming for another state, he really doesn't wanna live in the wilderness.
He does not want to live in the wilderness, yeah. Well, that's also strange. He's a valley dweller. Remember, that's what he liked. That's, hey, Abraham said, hey, which way do you want to go here? If you take the left, let's assume they're looking north. You take the left and Canaan, I'll go to the right in the valley. No, I like that valley. Very fertile. I want to live in the valley down there with those cities. He's committed to the, it's very consistent. He's committed to the plains and the valley. He did not like the hills. That's a very consistent portrayal of Lot. No, don't give me the hills, give me the valleys. And so when he chickens out on the hills, when the angels say, you need to go to the hills. He says, no, I want to stay in the valley and then in the plains. But you can see here with these, here's a really good example.
Get to the cave.
Exactly. That's the point, right? This is Qumran. But you can see what's the point? The point is precisely that they're difficult to get to and easily defensible.
They still have lions around there now?
I don't know. I don't know that I want to do a search for did they have lions in ancient. When did they have lions in Israel? You know,
David, you killed one.
but you know, You gotta really want whatever's in there to try to get in that cave. You know,
Yeah.
bandits or, you know,
So is this near Zoar? Is that where he would have?
well, this is Qumran, but let's take a look.
That's near the Dead Sea, so.
Caves,
I don't know if that-
go caves, Zoar. Zorg.
Lots. Caves.
They were all over the place. I mean, there was a lot of them. But the Dead Sea Caves, I remember, let's go back to that, because I remember the Dead Sea Caves. Qumran. Oops. Qumran Caves. Uh, they're scattered all over the place, right? Take a look here. So that's how they lived. When you talk about the caves of Qumran, that's where they found these scrolls
Shepherd boy of all.
they're priceless. Yeah, the shepherd boy wandered into one of them and threw a stone or something and broke a pot. And the word got out and they came in and looked and they found all these perfectly preserved papyrus scrolls, among which was a complete scroll of Isaiah
Mhm.
from a couple of hundred BC. In the prior to the Dead Sea, the oldest manuscript evidence we had of the Old Testament was the work by the Masoretes, who had a habit of burning the previous copy, so it left no tradition. So our previously our oldest Hebrew text was 1200 AD.
Mhm.
So when they found these finds, they closed the gap by 1300 years, 1400 years, some number like that. So, you know, you got a complete scroll of Isaiah from 1200 AD, which is the result of time after time copying. And all of a sudden you have a complete scroll of Isaiah, let's just say 1300 years earlier. So with much trepidation, you're now going to find out how careful these people are copying.
That's extremely fair.
And the answer is, boy, were they careful, because there's no significant difference between the two. No surprises there. It's really, really extraordinary.
Yeah, well,
Which,
I mean, the preservation of the word of God is just as important as.
it's unbelievable. Yeah.
The inspiration.
It's I don't call it inspiration, I call it providence. But it just goes to show you, these people thought they took it seriously. This is sacred text.
Not inspiration, what do you call
Providence.
it? Providence.
Yeah. And the New Testament, we have manuscript evidence from, let's assume that the Gospel of John was written in the 90s AD. Then Jesus would have been crucified and rose in 30 or 32 AD. John would have been written in the 90s. I don't know if you agree with that. But we have the Faroe Islands fragment found in Egypt is dated from 125, 130 AD. So we're talking a generation. And then there's lots of manuscript evidence from 200. The Chester Beatty papyri and the what's the other one? I forgot. That's one is a whole bunch of the Gospels and one is a whole bunch of Paul, but they're right around 200. So we're talking 150 years or so, 140 years after the writings. Just extraordinary, 3 or 4 generations. So yeah, of course they can. They're not they're not us. They're not the telephone tag thing where you whisper something in somebody's ear and then they whisper it and they whisper it. And by the time you get to the other end, it's all morphed out of there's no recognition of what was originally said. This is not that. These people believed this was sacred text, inspired by God. They had a sacred duty. They wanted to know what was originally written. That's what they wanted to preserve, period. Or if they were paid, because they had paid scribes, they were paid to copy the original text. And a lot of them, when they copied, they didn't even know Greek. So they didn't know to say, I want to change this, because they didn't even know Greek. They were just copying letters, which would explain why all of a sudden it doesn't make sense, because when they went back up here, they came back to the wrong place and they missed that looked similar and they missed a bunch of text in between. It's totally explained to me, oh, okay, that's a guy that his eyes went down and when he came back up, he went back to something that sounds similar and he missed 3 verses or something like that, whatever. But, anyway, those are back to the point. These are the caves that he decided he ended up having to live in. I would understand, I wouldn't want to live in one of these things either. So it'd be your last resort, right? But, yeah, that's where the Essenes did their work. One of the 4 sectarian groups: Pharisees, Sadducees, Herodians. You have Zealot. Well, they're not really. That's political. Pharisees, Sadducees, and Essenes were the 3 sort of sectarian religious Jewish groups, major Jewish sectarian groups at the time of Jesus. We don't see them in the New Testament, the Essenes. They were very, very secretive, very isolated away from society on purpose, waiting for the end, basically.
That shepherd boy was a pretty good ball player. Throw a stone way up there and hit those clay things and break it.
Unless he was climbing around and he was actually entering one and he's throwing stones around to see what's, I don't know. It's a great story though. I don't think it's an urban legend. I think that's a real story.
No, that was like
Yeah.
1948 or something like that.
And they're still uncovering them because all they've got is there's the caves they know, and then they're looking for other caves and other finds. But they have a real problem because they're all wrapped up and they've been that way for, over 2,000 years. So you can't just unwind them. They disintegrate. So they got special equipment that'll let them take a camera around it like this and read it, painstakingly read it. Oh, they can do that? Wow, that's really amazing.
Amazing thing as far as the New Testament, with the ancient manuscripts when compared to any other ancient text. I mean, if you look at Homer's Iliad, you only have 1 or 2 copies of the ancient text, as well known as that is. But you have thousands of Greek texts.
Yeah, last I knew, there was about 5,300 manuscripts there's not a lot of full ones, complete ones. There's only a handful of those, but 5,300 manuscript fragments of the New Testament in Greek. And Homer's Iliad, last I knew, was at 640 or something like that. And Tacitus' Annals of Imperial Rome, his history of the Roman Empire, was 14. I think it's 14, or was that 14 volume? But there might only be 1 or 2 of those. But nobody thinks that it's been seriously bastardized. Because when you copy that stuff for a reason. You copy because you want to preserve it. Why else are you copying it? So it's not like you're copying it to make up your own, Homer's Iliad was a sacred text among the Greeks. They took their religion seriously too. Okay. 23. The sun had risen on the earth when Lot came to Zoar. The Lord rained down. He gets there like the angel said. The Lord rained down on Sodom and Gomorrah sulfur and fire from the Lord out of heaven. He overthrew those cities and all the valley and all the inhabitants of the cities. You get the sense there's a lot more than just Sodom and Gomorrah there. And what grew on the ground, he laid waste to the valley. But Lot's wife behind him looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. So then you can ask, what does look back mean? Does it mean actually start to go back? Not just turn around and look, but go back? That'd be my hunch.
I would say she, but she just turned her head back like this and
Yeah, I think
it was,
I think she wanted
you kind of wonder if that pillar of salt is still there till today.
well, salt disintegrates in rain, so
Yeah, I did it though.
Yeah.
I know if there was a huge explosion behind me, I'd probably go, what? wanna see what happened.
He's-
That's why I
he's-
wondered
Nick-
if it's
Mike is
more than
right.
just-
Uh. Let's see,
do not look-
do not even look back, right there. So she looked back. My hunch is she did more than
Yeah.
look back, but
Yeah,
the intent of her heart, why she was looking back?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah, she's doing more than it's more than curiosity. I can picture Lot dragging her out of the city.
You didn't wanna leave.
So, I mean, even that, you know, 2 acres had to basically take hold of.
They dragged him out of the city.
Because I think Platt became one of the pillars of the city of Platt. Like one of the government officials or something, where he didn't want to leave his home, his position and everything else.
Well, they certainly didn't gain him any favor when they showed up at his house. Now he was just a foreigner.
Yeah. But I mean, Lot's hesitation could have been that he was frozen in the period too. That's the other side. of it.
Yeah.
It's hard to say because the spec doesn't give us enough information. My view, just my interpretation of Lot's wife, though, was that she was longing for what she had left.
Yeah, that's what I
And
think too.
that's, she was disobedient to a known command, and she paid the penalty.
What were you gonna say?
Well, she was drug out by an angel, just like her husband was.
Yeah.
So they didn't go, ooh, we're getting out of here.
No, they didn't want to go. They had 2 husbands, or they were on their way to having 2 husbands that were from Sodom. They identified with Sodom, and they paid the price for it. Abraham went out early in the morning to the place where he had stood before the Lord the night before, the day before, whenever, be 2 nights before or something like that. He looked down towards Sodom and Gomorrah. He's, hilly country. So he'd be in hilly country. He would be, in Hillary.
You run heaven at that time.
He's in Mamre.
Mary.
Be in hilly country,
we're there.
yeah, up there. I mean, but if you're up on a hill and you're looking down in a situation like this from Mamre, you can see, the whole of Israel is only, how far is Israel from top to bottom?
So, 200 miles or something like that?
Top to bottom is 200 miles.
Probably only about 60 to 70 miles. I was in my, last week when we were talking about, I went back and kind of measured it from and it's about 60 miles. It probably fit inside of Michigan, top it off.
Oh,
So it's not very far.
I
It
think
only,
it's more like South
They-
Carolina.
I've heard Maryland.
Okay.
it's very narrow and it's not very long actually.
273 kilometers.
About 0.6, so multiply, cut it in half and add a little bit.
So
So now, remember, horizon from here to, horizon is 25 miles. Now you're up on a hill, you're looking at 40 or 50 miles. And all it says is he could see the smoke rising. You'd see that from a long ways away.
Especially that much smoke.
I didn't realize you could, the horizon was 25.
27 miles on Earth, I think.
I did
It just
not
looks
know.
like-
No, that's out on,
See
that's out on the,
tree.
I think I remember when I was in the Navy, out on the ocean, if you look at the horizon and you see something pop up on the horizon, it's about 27 miles away, but somebody can look it up.
And what is the timing of this? It says Abraham got up in early morning and then it said right after dawn is when they left the city, and so he's got to walk all the way down to Zoar before the sun comes up. I don't understand. Is that all the same day?
Yeah, I think so.
I think so.
Very, very quick.
I think
It's not
so.
that fast.
The very day that they showed up to Abraham on chapter 18, that night is when they show up to Lot, got him out, and the next day they destroyed it. So when Abraham rose, it could have been the day following. It's hard to say.
Mhm.
The point being the pace. What, because why is he in a hurry? The angels arrive and act like there is no time to spare. They are on a time, they're on a,
Too, back and just said, okay, once they got Abraham's thing, all of a sudden they could have just, you know,
Yes.
it was like,
I would
because
assume.
basically, even when Christ, I mean, when he saw them coming originally, you know, they probably just came from heaven right down to the point where they could, he could almost see them when they were walking. So, you know, I'm sure that God just said, okay, you're right there.
it's
So,
it's a crisis. The situation is presented as a crisis. An urgency like a flood is coming that cannot be stopped. And so you can imagine that. Here comes the flood of water like a tsunami, and there is no stopping it. Get up, get out now. Now, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. You need to go because the flood is coming. That's their situation, even though he can do it whenever he wants. But you're not going to hear the angels say, well, okay, well, you think about it, where you want to go, and we'll discuss it again tomorrow morning. There's none of that. The angels are in an urgent situation. Okay, so he goes to Zoar after insisting. What time is it? Oh, we gotta stop. This would have been the first time in a long time we finished the whole chapter in one. Well, actually, we didn't because was last week. But we'll pick this up and then get into Abimelech next time. He's not gonna last very long in Zoar. And then it's gonna be a nasty story. And then we'll talk about the situation in Judges, which is nasty as well. All right, that's it.
I got a call from, during class,
Oh,
Carolyn Daly passed away in the night,
oh,
and she thought you guys would pray for what is coming next for,
In case you didn't hear that on the stream, Carolyn Daly passed away last night.
some pray for.
Okay. And I'm gonna go ahead and shut down the feed now. Thanks for joining, everybody.
Thanks, Gary.
right.